Quite a dynamic speaker and someone tough to follow. Maybe I'll share a little story before you introduce the next speaker. Very significant leader of one of the major corporations here in the U.S., a fellow named Jeff Immelt, was running General Electric for many, many years. Jeff's an interesting person in that, you know, in his background, he was an offensive tackle at Dartmouth. And if you haven't seen it, there's a great video that the National Football Foundation developed that interviewed Jeff about being a football player and what it meant to be a football player. It's really terrific. After Jeff retired from GE, he was teaching here at the Stanford Business School, and I had lunch with him one day. And I was talking to him about the summit, and I, suggested, he said, do you have any, I said, any good ideas on speakers we should invite? And he said, well, yes, I have a great idea, and let me tell you a story. And so the story went like this. He said, I was in my second year at Harvard Business School, and my 5th class reunion was up at Dartmouth, up in Hanover, New Hampshire. And so I went up Friday night, before the game, and of course I went to my fraternity, and it was pretty raucous and wild, but he said I had to find a place to sleep. So there's no way I was going to sleep anywhere near the fraternity because it was just, too wild. But he said, I remembered there was a bunk bed or a series of bunk beds in the football office. And he said, what I'm going to go do is I'm going to wander over to the football office and see if the doors are open, and I'm going to grab a bunk bed. So lo and behold, he wanders over to the football office, and it's midnight or 1 o'clock, and he finds another gentleman who happened to be one of the coaches up and doing some pregame work for the game next day in one of the bunk beds. And he said, introduced himself, and they had this great conversation. And that individual was Joe Moglia. Joe Moglia at the time was assistant coach at Dartmouth. And Joe shared some of his authentic feelings at the time, which was, look, being a coach is really tough on a young family. Your work commitment, your hours are very significant, and your it's just a lot of sacrifices you make. I love the game and everything about the game. And Jeff said, at some point down the road, we ought to connect, and we ought to stay in touch, and so on and so forth. 3 or 4 years later, Jeff told me he met some folks at Merrill Lynch, and they were actively looking for some talent. And he said, well, you need to talk to this guy, Joe Moglia. So that led a journey. That led me to Joe coming to speak with us. But let me tell you more about his background. So he's got a very unusual journey, and I think something that I surely admire because it's been a love of the game and achievement at very, very different levels. So he was the former head football coach and executive advisor to the president and chairman emeritus of athletics at Coastal Carolina. He's also the former CEO and chairman of TD Ameritrade. In 2012, Joe became the head coach at Coastal Carolina. In his first 5 seasons, he went to the national playoff 5 times and won the conference championship 4 times. His overall record of 56-22 in his last 11 years of college coaching has been really amazing in that he's a part of 8 championship teams. He was selected to the Conference All-Decade team and was received numerous coaching awards, including the Eddie Robinson National Coach of the Year, and was recipient of the Lombardi Award. In his last 4 years as executive director of football at Coastal Carolina, they've won 40 games, invited to 4 bowls, and won a Sun Belt championship. So Joe's been a football coach for 25 years, but it's not the traditional 25 years. He began his career as a coach for 16 years, then moved to the business world for 24 years. And then he went back to football in 2009. In the business world, he was at Merrill Lynch for 17 years before becoming CEO of Ameritrade in 2001. When Joe stepped down in 2008, the shareholders enjoyed a 500% return. Another person who could have helped my 401k had he given us a little bit of an advance notice about how their stock was going to perform for a period of time. In 2009, he became chairman and stepped down in 2020 when TD Ameritrade was acquired by Schwab. At the close, the company was worth $100 billion with client assets of $7 trillion. Just to sort of give you a sense of that, when he joined TD Ameritrade, the market cap was $700 million, and there were only $24 billion in assets. Joe has received the Ellis Island Medal of Honor, recognized for both the Italian and Irish, and particularly the Irish, I'm going to put the Irish up there in front, communities, along with the multiple stuttering organizations, and has been inducted to 12 Halls of Fame. In 2022, Joe became the 4th alumnus in the 190-year history of Fordham University to receive the university's 3 most prestigious awards. He's a member of the National Economics Hall of Fame and is a recipient of 3 honorary doctorate degrees and has given 9 commencement addresses. Fourth and Goal by Monty Burke, a book written about his life and Monty's personally the only person who's ever written books that have been published both on investing and football. A remarkable journey. We're delighted Joe's going to be with us here today. I'm fascinated by his story and achievements and wanted to have you all welcome Joe Moglia.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate that, Mark. Nicolo Mastromateo played for me as a wide receiver in 2016. He was an All-American, and he also was a nominee for the Campbell Trophy. And so that was, for Coastal Carolina, that was the first person we had that received that honor. He didn't win it, but it was an incredible event that many of you have been at. You know, the black tie event, 1,600 people, the Waldorf Astoria. But from the time I began coaching, which was quite a while ago, I've been very much aware of the award and what it actually means. So I have tremendous respect for all of you for what you have done. And leadership, to me, is a differentiator. And there's a tremendous amount of leadership specifically in this room. And I'm well aware of that. But with regard to the Campbell Trophy specifically, you know, what Mark's doing with the summit, what Intuit's doing in terms of its support, what the National Football Foundation is doing with regard to its support, is really something very, very special. And it's going to go on for a long, long time. I have no doubt about that. Bill Campbell is somebody I actually called in 2009 when I was making a decision to go back to football. But he and I met for the first time when I was a high school football coach. And my goal as a coach was to become the major college, head coach at a major college elite program. That was my goal. Well, if I'm going to do that, I better at least begin coaching in college. So I'm in the high school level. And Bill was the head football coach at Columbia. And he interviewed me for the freshman job. I prepared for that interview for like days. And I met with the staff. I had film. I had playbooks. I told them how we're going to do this, how we're going to organize, how we're going to recruit. I'm from New York City. I can recruit New York City and Columbia, do all these things. I leave, and I think there is a chance that I'm not going to get this job. And it was going back home for me. You know, I talked to my wife and my family. Talked about we're going to move. We start to think about that. Well, I get a call about a week later. We don't want you for this job. You're not going to get this job. Okay, so I didn't get the job as the freshman coach at Columbia. But fortunately, 3 months later, I did get the secondary job at Lafayette. And as it turns out, for the next 3 seasons, we played Columbia. And then when I went from there to the defensive coordinator job at Dartmouth, well, we're in the same league. For those 3 years, we also played Columbia. So for what it's worth, Bill may not have given me that job, but I was 6-0 against Bill Campbell, just for whatever that happens to be worth. And I wasn't specifically planning to talk about this, but 4 or 5 people last night brought up the NIL. And I thought, since, again, with the leadership in this room, the most significant thing to happen in history of college sports, this is not even close, the most significant thing to happen in history of college sports is NIL. And I am for players getting paid. I always have been. But the way it was handled and the chaos around which it was rolled out and still exists today, if the NFL ran themselves the way college athletics is running themselves today, the NFL would go out of business. Remember, I'm for players getting paid, but not the chaos that we have today. So when the deal was announced, when the NIL was actually announced, it was about 3 years ago, the NCAA actually abdicated their responsibility for this. And over 5 decades, across 2 very different careers where I feel leadership is a big deal, I find that to be the most horrific example of leadership that I have seen over my span of my career. And we love the game of football. We love the game of college. We love college athletics. But is going through some chaos and turmoil now, and we'll figure it out. But this could have been figured out a couple of years ago. And it was the NCAA's job to protect our student athletes. And they didn't do that. Didn't do that. So with regard to leadership, I wanted to share what my philosophy is, because it's fairly unique. And it's unique in the sense that there are no rules with what I believe in terms of leadership. But my leadership philosophy has guided me and has been my differentiating competitive advantage over the span of 5 decades across 2 entirely different careers. And the standard is this. This is it, by the way. This is it. You stand on your own 2 feet. You take responsibility for yourself. You always treat others with dignity and respect, and you live with the consequences of your actions. That's it. Now, I've got 120 guys in my football program. So for us, be a man. We have an acronym, we have a logo, it's all over the campus. That worked pretty well. But BAM is not meant to be sexist. I raised my daughters on the same principle. I didn't call it BAM. My female executives at Merrill Lynch and in Ameritrade were held to that same standard. We didn't call it BAM. But look at BAM as an acronym for leadership. And we use BAM all the time. My daughters will tell her kids, you know, TJ, Sammy, you better BAM up. You better be able to live up to what you're supposed to be. It can be a verb, it can be a noun, it can be an adjective, but it's all about leadership. So once again, it's an acronym for leadership. So a real man, a real woman, a real leader stands on their own 2 feet, takes responsibility for themselves, treats others with dignity and respect, and lives with the consequences of their actions. That's it. Now with this, there are no excuses. None. Zero. There are no excuses. So there are a lot. We can come up with excuses all the time. With regard to football and being a student athlete, you know, some excuses could easily be, you know, I would have gotten an A in that course, but the teacher really didn't like me. He didn't like football players. You know, I could have been an All-American, but my offensive coordinator really wasn't that good. At Coastal, our coaches are not allowed to yell at the referees during a game if there's a bad call. And the reason for that is when you come up with an excuse, you're subconsciously allowing yourself off the hook. So now you don't have to address it. So when things don't work out, it's okay. Because sometimes, you know, there was some other reason for it. It had nothing to do with you. It wasn't your responsibility. Something usurped that. Something came between you and the job you were supposed to do. And you had nothing. You couldn't do anything about that. That's bullshit. Right. So for us, I think one of the best examples. I know we haven't heard a lot of bullshit used so far today, but I'm going to kind of kick it in. I think the finest example that I have, but I've got many, but the finest example with regard to no excuses was 2013. It was the FCS 1AA level, and we were going to the national playoffs, and we were ranked 7th in the country. We're playing in Montana. They're ranked 4th in the country. We're playing at Montana. And normally that spread probably would have been 7 points. But the headline in the paper was, Beach Boys playing the Cowboys don't have a chance. Something along those lines. And the spread went to 28 points. Now, the reason for that is this was turned out to be the coldest day in the history of college sports. Coldest day in the history of college sports. It was -7 real, and it was -26 wind chill, and it was -26 wind chill the entire game. Right? So now Sunday, we've had a great season. We're 11-1 with something like that, and we're getting ready. We're getting ready talking about the game. And I noticed that there wasn't quite the enthusiasm in the room the way there normally is. So after about 15 minutes, I just stopped and said, guys, something's going on. What is it? And one of the coaches said, well, Coach, you know what? I said, you know, we've had a great season. We know that, but we're going to play in -26-degree weather. Last week, the average temperature was 72 degrees for us. We've got about 25 guys on the team that don't own coats and have never actually physically seen snow. So this is going to be a challenge above and beyond. So I stopped and I said, so therefore, if I get this right, we go, and should we lose the game, it's okay because the weather's bad and we're not capable of being able to handle the weather. Do I have this right? And I was probably saying it similar to the way I'm saying it now. And, oh, no, Coach, we're going to go after this. No, whoa. No, we have a problem. We're not worried about our offense, defense, special teams. We've been playing football for 4 or 5 months. We got to get this right. So if that's the issue, how do we solve for the issue? So we reached out to people that did research in the Arctic. We took advantage of research people in different walks of life, and there were a handful of things that we really started to learn. And what we did every day we had a half-an-hour meeting just on how to keep warm. Just on how to keep warm. Practices, which goes 2 hours, probably got about an hour, 15 minutes worth of working because we treated it like we're actually in the stadium at the game. So if you came off the field, you had to go to the bench with parkers, just like you would during the game. So some of the things that we wound up doing was we had certain salve on the body, certain types of clothes, et cetera. Everything froze, so we had to have individual thermoses for every one of the players, and they had hot chicken soup in there. We rented torpedo heaters that we put at the end of one bench, and everybody sat on the one bench. About 13 people sat on the one bench. So the torpedo heater is like little jet engines. So first thing you do when you come off the field, you usually take your hat off. You don't take your helmet off now. We train them. You go to the bench. You sit down. You take your helmet off now. You put it between your feet. Got the torpedo heaters heating your feet and heating your shoes and heating your helmet. We got radiant heaters over your head. So by the time you go back to the game, 3, 4, 5, 6 minutes later, your feet are warm, your hands are warm, your head is warm. You go back and you got to last another 4 or 5 minutes. Now, football coaches, and I'm sure many of you have had some of these football coaches. I know I have. Great group. I'm very, very proud to be part of that profession. But we can be real blockheads. And while we can be charismatic and we can be smart, a lot of times we kind of preach certain things. Like, for example, I have no doubt this was talked about in Missoula, Montana, and getting ready for our game. Are you kidding me? These guys are coming from the beach. They're coming from the beach. They're coming to our mountain. They're coming to Montana. This is our land. They're not going to be able to handle this. They're not going to be able to last 5 minutes with this cold. And we know it's not that cold for us because we live in this. Now, I did my homework. The average temperature in Montana in December is 14 degrees. It's not minus 26 degrees. Those are two very, very different temperatures. So don't worry about it. Don't worry about the rain. Don't worry about the heat. Don't worry about the cold. It's mind over matter. You toughen up. You're a football player, be tougher than that. And these guys, they're the beach boys coming in from coastal Carolina. You know, they're not going to know what hit them. We never approached it that way. We said, this is going to be the coldest day of your life. This is how we're going to handle the cold. And we prepared that way. Now we're in warm-ups. Here they come out in the field for warm-ups. We were out there first. They're wearing short sleeves. And I think, you know what? Just maybe we got a shot with these guys. Just maybe we've got a shot. So after 3 minutes, we're losing 14-0. We ran the next 35 points, and at halftime, we were up 35-14, and we beat them. Probably, and I've been at Nebraska when we beat Oklahoma. I've been part of some incredible upsets in my life. Never have I been part of a game like this. But there were no excuses. There were no excuses. Had we allowed excuses, they would have beat. I have no doubt they would have beaten us because we would have been as prepared as we probably should have. And subconsciously, we said, what a great season we had. What do you expect? It was minus 26 degrees. No excuses. Doesn't mean you're always going to be successful. But there are no excuses. So I think there are certain principles I want to talk about with regard to BAM. But before I do that, I think Mark certainly did a good job of reading my professional history. But I want to share some personal parts of my life that give you a better understanding of why these principles and this philosophy really matters to me. By the way, I wrote this down when I was 22 years old. It's the same philosophy I've been using five decades later. I use it because, for me, it has been my competitive advantage, and it's what's differentiated me and my teams and my organizations and my businesses from others. I grew up in the Dyckman Street section of New York City. It's a gang area. My father never finished second grade. He was born in Italy. My mother never went to high school. She was born in Ireland. I was the oldest of 5 kids. 7 of us lived in a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom apartment. I was part of a gang from the time I was 10. 2 of my very best friends from grammar school that I was with every day in grammar school, every day got killed in high school. One died of a drug overdose. The other was killed by the police robbing a liquor store. Had I not been playing high school football, I would have been with the guy robbing the liquor store. Not maybe, I would have been with him. Now, that was kind of a wake-up call, too, for me, in terms of what was going on in the neighborhood and what I was trying to get done at school. And so that really kind of doubled my effort. I wanted to have the best high school career I could have. I wanted to play football and baseball in college. Who might allow me to play both of those? That's where I wanted to go. My girlfriend gets pregnant. Well, now college is over. Football's over. Baseball's over. I'm not going to be able to do any of that. My father sold bananas and apples in the Bronx his entire life, and I worked for him from the time I was 10. Remember, he never finished second grade. He thought this was a good opportunity not to worry about going to college at all and simply come and work in the fruit store. And I said, Dad, I really think I got to go to college. And he said, son, we have no money for that. And I said, I know, I'll figure it out. And he says, you got to think about this, serious decision. I went back to him a day later and said, Dad, I decided I'm going to go to college. Now, this is my father. Think of the situation. I'm going to be a father. I'm going to get married, and I want to go to college. And my father tells me, son, you're making a big mistake. But great vote of confidence as I began my college career, and I began at Fordham University in the Bronx, and my freshman year, I'm supporting my wife and daughter. I'm paying every dime of education. I'm driving a yellow cab in New York City, a truck for the post office, and working at my father's fruit store. Now, compared to most of you, I would bet you that you had more fun as a freshman in college than I did. Wild guess, just a wild, crazy guess, but I'd bet that. It was also the first year of my life I didn't have sports, and where I went to high school, Fordham Prep, was on the same campus. They offered me a coaching job. So my sophomore, junior, and senior year, I majored in economics. I wanted to go to Wall Street. I coached football during the season. I worked at my father's fruit store in the off season. But I really, truly loved the coaching. The impact that it had on me, I thought was really, really significant. And my wife and I talked about this. And if I could get a head high school job without college experience, without knowing anybody, if I could get a head high school job, I'd pursue a career in coaching. If not, I was going to try to go to Wall Street. Probably applied to 100 schools. At 22, to this day, I'm the youngest head football coach in the history of the state of Delaware. I went to a place called Archbury Academy. At the time, it was an all-boys Catholic school. Today, it's co-ed. Quick segue in that. That also happens to be where Joe Biden went. And all of his kids went to Archbury. Now, you fast forward a little bit, and now it's 1981, and the defensive coordinator at Dartmouth, and we have 4 children. And as Mark pointed out, when he was talking to Jeff Immelt, you know, life as a coach is not easy. So I coached 16 years up to that point. I had 5 jobs and 4 children. And back then, coaches didn't make any money. So 1981, we're in the middle of a staff meeting. The sheriff from Hanover, New Hampshire, comes in, and he needs to see me. And I think, oh, my God, there's a death or something in the family. He says, Coach, I'm really sorry. He hands me divorce papers. Now, I couldn't afford to live independently and take care of my wife and 4 kids. So I got permission to move into a storage room above the football offices. We put 1 bed in there for me. That's what Immelt was talking about that Mark referred to earlier on. I lived there for 2 years. That wasn't so bad, but it had no heat. This is New Hampshire. The average temperature in the wintertime is probably like single digits. I could see my breath during the wintertime. Well, that's where I lived for 2 years. Now, 1984, Miami beats Nebraska for the national championship. I get a call from the University of Miami. Howard Schnellenberger was the head coach. Tom Alvedati was defensive coordinator. They offered me the secondary job, and I'm going to succeed Alvedati when he leaves. Everybody that was coaching in Miami through the 80s got incredible jobs, major jobs. There's no better job in the world I could get if I'm going to be a head major college coach. I'm going to go from defensive coordinator in the Ivy League to defensive coordinator at the national championship team. But I mentioned we didn't make much money back then. We worked 75 or 80 hours a week, 7 days a week. We don't get a day off for 5 months. Then we got to go on the road recruiting. I'm going to live in Coral Gables. My children are still going to live in New Hampshire with their mother. I can't afford to fly 4 kids back and forth. Toughest career decision I have ever made in my life was turning down that job. But I didn't believe I could do my job as a coach if I couldn't live up to my responsibility as a father. But turning down that job meant I knew I had to get out of coaching. So I said at the beginning, I always had an interest in Wall Street. So I was interviewing different institutional firms. Jeff Immelt may very well have helped me at Merrill Lynch. But bottom line, I get a job in the institutional MBA training program at Merrill. There were 26 of us, 25 MBAs from Harvard, Stanford, et cetera, and 1 football coach. And everybody said, this football guy's never going to make it here. But a few years later, those MBAs were working for me. And I couldn't be prouder of the 17-year career I had at Merrill Lynch. And then when I went to Ameritrade, when I decided to take that job, if you know the history on this, you had the dot-com run during the 90s. That bubble burst in March 2000. We had a serious recession from March 2000 to March 2003. In the middle of that, the dot-com companies, the online brokerage firms, were going out of business. Ameritrade was one of those going out of business. And the bottom line is, at a time in my life where things were really pretty good for me at Merrill Lynch, and I had remarried, and I decided we're going to take this job, and we moved from New York City to Omaha, Nebraska. And again, very, very proud of what we wound up doing there. Now, when I stepped down in 2009, the board asked me to become chairman. I'd be honored to do that. By the way, the whole time I coached, I was chairman of Ameritrade. That $100 billion, the deal we did with Schwab, I negotiated that deal. I began that when I was still coaching. And how many college coaches do you think could say that? A lot of them, I think. So we had gotten it right. Now, the 500% return that Mark referred to included the financial crisis. That included the financial crisis. The rest of Wall Street didn't get it right. So I had never been more in demand in my life than it was then. But I wasn't stepping down because I wanted to get a bigger job. I was stepping down because it was kind of time for me to step down. I thought maybe there's something else I want to do with my life. Never thought about coaching. Never thought about going back to coaching. Then I get a call from a group of alumni at Yale telling me that their football job might be open. Would I be interested? And I remember looking at the telephone and said, I said, I've not coached for 24 years. And they said, well, I know that. We know that. But we also looked at the skill sets a head coach at the NFL or college level is supposed to have. We think you not only have those, but you have competitive advantage other coaches are not even going to have. There's one problem. Yeah? What's that? In 120 years of college football, nothing like this has ever happened before. This has never happened before. So it's going to take a unique president in the world of academia to be able to take that risk, whatever that may be. And I began it in Nebraska for 2 years, and then then I got a head job in the UFL with Jimmy Fossil and Denny Green and Marty Schottenheimer and Jerry Glanville. But that was the third year of the UFL at the time. They've come back recently, but they had done a poor job of managing themselves. We had 4 games. We had 1 week of preseason. Went out of business. I get a call then from David DeCenzo, who's the president of Coastal Carolina. I said, I've been following your career from the very beginning. I know more about you than you do. I said, our program has been pretty mediocre. We think, at least at the FCS level, we can compete at the national level. We think one day we should be a candidate to get to the FBS. Bottom line, would you take over our program and run it? I take that. That's how I went from coaching to Wall Street, from Wall Street back to coaching. That's how that happened. So that's my background, and that may help a little bit in terms of understanding some of the principles with regard to BAM that I want to share now. I think at the end of the day, for ourselves, we're people we care about, all we really want deep down is for them to be happy. They could have great jobs and not be happy. That's not what we want. They could have mediocre jobs, but be really truly happy with themselves. That is what we want. We want to be happy. We want them to be happy. Well, I think happiness in life, success, self-fulfillment is very much determined by critical decisions you make under stress. I'm going to repeat that. Success, happiness, fulfillment is very much determined by the critical decisions you make under stress. So to feel good about what's going on in your life, to achieve those things, how do you increase the probability that you're going to make the right decisions? How do you increase that probability? Now, I think you really got to know who you are. You got to be spiritually sound. You got peace of mind. Now, this can be religion, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. You just have to know who you are. And so often we believe we do, but we really don't. And for those, remember Sam earlier said, you know, I want everybody to like me. Well, that's kind of true. Most of us want everybody to like them. We tend to be, without realizing this, subconsciously we're a composite of all the people we interact with and have, you know, reasonable relationships with. Our parents, our brothers, our siblings, our girlfriends, our boyfriends, our spouses, our partners, our people that we work with, our coaches, our teachers. We're a composite of all that. So how do you figure it out? How do you know if you really know yourself or not? And there's an exercise that we go through that every one of my players have gone through, everybody in my family's gone through, and many, many, many colleagues in the business world and the coaching world have gone through. To me, this is another one of those differentiators. So how do you do this? How do I get to know whether or not I really know myself? You take a legal pad and you begin writing. Topics yourself. You just keep writing. Who am I really? What's my favorite colors? What's my favorite music? What kind of movies do I like? What are my skill sets? What am I good at? What am I bad at? What turns me on? What turns me off? What kind of women do I like? What kind of men do I like? How am I as a dad? How am I as a brother? How am I as a teammate? How am I as an executive? You just keep writing. You keep writing. Eventually, you think you got it down, you stop. You walk away from it 3 weeks. Now, there's one rule here. There's 2 rules. Actually, you got to write it down because you're going to refer to it. But the number 1 rule, you cannot talk to anybody about this. The first time you go to your best friend, the closest person in the world, and go, well, what do you think? Subconsciously, you're looking for their approval. This has nothing to do with anybody else. This is you and God. This is a pure examination of conscience. That's what it is. The objective is to know who you are, not who you think you might be. who you really, really are. Now, you walk away from this, you come back to it about 3 or 4 weeks later, and this is anecdotal, but 95% of the time, 30% of the stuff that you write down, you change. And what happens, you say, oh, I thought my favorite entertainer was Ludacris, but you know what? I don't really like Ludacris that much. My girlfriend does. That's why I wrote that. And you keep looking at one question after another, and you start to change it. But then you get to the point where it's right. Remember, you're showing it to nobody. Then you look and say, I got it. I feel good about this. Now, okay, that's nice. How do you apply it to a critical decision? How do you actually apply it? Pretty much in here, I think we can talk about career path. We can talk about your next job. All right? So, okay, I know who I am. I got peace of mind with that, spiritually sound. And I recognize critical decisions in my life. I want to get those right. Well, now I'm going to decide, do I take the next job or do I take a particular career path? Do I change career paths? So what is that job? What are the skill sets required to be really good at that job? Do your homework on that. Really look into that. Talk to people that do that. Do your research. Don't just ask a professor what they think or a friend what they think. Look into this. Look into it. What are the skill sets required to be successful in that job? Now, you know what your skill sets are. So do your skill sets match the skill sets that are required to take that job? If the answer is no, I don't care how much you might like that job, do not take the job. Do not go down that career path. It will not be the right one for you long term. If your skill sets do match up, you still got to ask yourself one more question. Is this something I would really, really love to do? If the answer to that is yes, you got the skill set, it's something that you can be passionate about, that's a career path that you're going to have where you're going to have a competitive advantage over a lot of other people. So again, the greater probability that you know who you are, the greater probability you'll make the right critical decisions under stress. Second principle here is courage. I define courage as the guts to do what you believe is right. This one is a tough one for me because all the time I do this when I prepare for something like this. And I come across the courage thing, I kind of examine my own conscience, and I know there are times in my life I've not been able to live up to this. And I'm not proud of that. My personal life, professional life. So we have many, many different roles that we play. But it's the courage to do what you believe is right, the guts to do what you believe is right. You know, the geopolitical situation in the world today is as stressful and as serious as I've ever seen it in my lifetime. We live in the greatest country in the world, but there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people in the world that have unlimited funding that will not hesitate to give up their lives to take our lives away because they feel we are evil. And by the way, they and their entire family will be rewarded in the afterlife for that. That's pretty significant motivation. So we can only pray that our military and political leaders have the guts to make the right decisions for our national defense and not worry about whether or not it's a popular decision, not worry about whether or not they're going to be reelected, not worry about whether or not they're going to get promoted. Now, most time when you do the right thing and you're good at it, those things work out anyway. But those cannot be the reasons. You've got to make the right decision. This is the national defense of our country. So what role can we play in something like that, by the way, besides saying a prayer for them? Well, we live in a democracy, so we've got the right to vote. So something I'm incredibly proud of. At the time we were the only. Today, now we are the first. In the entire 140-year history of college football, in 2016, the only program whose entire team voted for the President of the United States was Coastal Carolina. And that was all part of this. That was part of our responsibility. Terrorism is one of the most significant things going on in the world. I want my guys to know that and understand that. All right? So again, the guts to do what you believe is right. And then with regards to the real world today, it's litigious. There's lawsuits one after another, after another, after another. Everything's going to be handled by rules and regulations. I could be off of my numbers here, but you're going to get the point. The IRS manual, I think, is like over 50,000 pages. The NCAA manual, I think, is over 3,000 pages. The golf manual, 117 pages. So you cannot regulate ethics. You cannot legislate ethics. You can't do that. You can't do that. And that's what comes down to real leadership. Because every one of us in this room, we know the difference between right and wrong. And as a real leader, we try all the time to do what we believe is right and not do what we believe is wrong. Don't go check the contract. Don't go check the rule. Do what you believe is the right thing. And then the final point with regards to leadership, and I think all three of these are really pretty important, but it's love. And I'm talking about the power of love. I define love as the commitment to the well-being of others. Now, as athletes, we can see this in our team. You know, there's a sense of camaraderie, a sense of a sense of committing to the well-being of others in the team. We see that in teams. You see it in the armed forces. Look at special ops. Those guys are teams. Every one of them have the best interest of their partner at heart. But this is a function, by the way, this is a function of within, I don't care what the field is, whether it's business or something else, it's a function of the leadership. You can have committed, care about others, teamwork type of qualities in all those respective businesses. It depends on, frankly, who the leader might be. Now, by the way, when I talk about leadership here, I'm not necessarily talking about a management job. You could be a leader and not necessarily have a management position. There are plenty of people in management positions that are not good leaders, right? And there are plenty of people that don't have management positions that happen to be very, very good leaders. I have no doubt the quality of leadership in this room is very, very, very significant. So when I talk about kind of the commitment, love, commitment to the well-being of others, it's intense, and it's more intense than the references I'm making in the real world, but we really get it right away when we talk about our families. So I'm going to share a couple of things that happened in my life. And again, committing to the well-being of others. Now, before I actually begin this, there are too often where the egos of the leaders get in the way. And I think, and Brad, I think, talked about this earlier today, and they think it's about them. They want to look good in front of the board. They want to look good on TV. They want to come across smart, all that stuff. It's not leadership. Leadership is about your people. It's about the people you take care of. It's the people you serve. That's what leadership is about. So in terms of caring for them, when I was 13, I tell you how I grew up. And we had a family meeting. We never had a family meeting. We had a family meeting, and Mom was going to go in the hospital for a little while, just a routine thing. If you're going to come out, no big deal. Now, I already told you, I grew up in a gang. I thought I was a badass. We had a two-bedroom apartment for 7 of us. My dad was on his knees by his bed, and I thought he was saying a prayer or something, and he was crying. My dad died a few years ago of Alzheimer's. I never saw my dad crying in his life. I went, Dad, what's the matter? He said, I'm worried about Mom. That's all I had to hear. So I go to bed that night. Now, I mentioned my mom was born and raised in Ireland. She came to this country. There was nobody in her family that could afford to come to this country. When Mom got married, she got married in if you saw the Bronx Tale, it's that section of the Bronx, the Italian section. She walked down the aisle. There was not one person from her hometown or from her family that was in that church. And we were it. And Dad wasn't, by the way, he wasn't an easy guy to live with. Dad wasn't a BAM guy. Everything was usually somebody else's fault. Mom was a BAM person, and she unconditionally loved us, and the 5 of her kids were her life. And I knew that. And I remember thinking, if my father is crying about this is not a routine thing. This got to be really serious. I remember being scared to death. My mother may not come back, and we are her whole life. She moved 3,000 miles to be part of this family. We're living in a gang neighborhood. And I never told my mother I loved her. And it hit me, that's the one thing that would have meant the world to her that I never did. And I remember praying. And, oh, God, just please, bring Mom home. I'm not going to make that mistake again. Mom did come home. And I didn't make that mistake again. I wanted her to know how I felt. Fast forward. I just got the Ameritrade job. It's 2001. I just moved from New York City to Omaha. I worked in Maryland 17 years. Maryland's world headquarters is 100 yards from the World Trade Center. My apartment where I lived, 10-minute walk from work, it was 250 yards from the World Trade Center. My son and daughter, Kara and Kevin, had been working at Merrill Lynch for about a year or two. They lived with their other sister, Kim, in Brooklyn. I'm getting ready in the morning, and I'm watching the planes flying into the building. Now, this is where I lived. This is where I worked. My children are working there. But there's nothing I can do. And part of being a leader is understand when there's really something you can't do anything about. And there wasn't anything I could do then, but I was responsible for our assets at Ameritrade, our customers, our employees. So we go in emergency mode when we go into work. And that's what I try to focus on. But my mind keeps drifting back to what's going on in New York. And I get a call that morning from my daughter, Kim. It said that, Dad, I talked to Kevin and Kara. They're both okay. I just want you to know, I'm sure you got a lot of things going on. I just wanted you to know that. I'm sure you're concerned. I said, Kim, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. She calls me about 3 hours later, and she said, Dad, I talked to Kara, and Merrill Lynch evacuated the building. She's in Jersey City. Kara's really stressed out, but she's okay. But the last time anybody saw Kevin, he was going over the sites to see if he could help out. Dad, have you heard from Kevin? No, Kim, I haven't. I went through the rest of the day with a very real awareness that I probably lost my son. But what was odd about it is I had a little bit of a sense of peace along with that. And as I thought about that, if I lost my son that day, there's nothing I would have wanted to tell him I didn't tell him already. Nothing. And I think that was because of what happened when I was 13 with my mother. So understand this. Okay? Don't hesitate to communicate how you feel to people you care about. Don't wait till tomorrow. Don't wait till the next day. Your communication with the people you care about, and this could very well be your friends, your colleagues, your employees, people you care about, your family, your loved ones, really, really, really matters. So now jump back to the business world or some other field of life. Think about if your people that you're responsible for believe that you really have your best interest at heart, and we know you got to balance that with shareholder profit. We know that. But if they really believe that you got your best interest, their best interest at heart, they will follow you anywhere. You'll be able to accomplish things that your competition not going to be able to do. Not going to be able to do. So I think, from my perspective, I really believe that history has really been shaped by the men and the women who do stand on their own 2 feet, who do take responsibility for themselves, do always treat others with dignity and respect, and wise enough to recognize they're going to live with the consequence of their actions. I really believe that. There's tremendous leadership in this room. I shared with you what I really believe has been my competitive advantage over 5 decades in my personal life and across 2 entirely different careers. I respect the leadership that's in this room. But if you can come away with 1 or 2 thoughts, or if I've just given you something little to think about, I couldn't be prouder that I was here today. Thanks for having me. Thank you. All right, if we have questions, I'm going to make a suggestion. Okay? So if you see 2 hands go up, the person with the second microphone, get over to the second hand so we don't wait in between, okay? You got it? You got that? Any questions? You got that? You got that? There's a lady. We got it? Okay, let's go.
Thanks, Coach. That was incredible. Really appreciate it. My question is about your time at Ameritrade. You mentioned you lived in Omaha.
Yeah.
Did you have a relationship or interactions with Warren Buffett? And are there any parallels between him and Bill Campbell?
Warren Buffett became a friend. Here's a story associated with it. So it was 2004. Liz Clayman was a senior anchor at CNBC at the time. She since left and went to Fox. She was writing a book on investments. She was interviewing me for the book. We were on Wall Street. We were having dinner. At the end of the dinner, I said to her, I said, well, have you talked to Buffett about the book? And she goes, well, no. I go, why not? Well, Buffett doesn't like to do interviews. He doesn't like to do that. He doesn't like to do that. I go, first of all, Liz, I'm sure he's a big fan. I had no idea whether or not he was. And I'm sure he watches you. I had no idea if he watched you. I said, but for Christ's sake, you're a journalist. You're a financial journalist writing a book on investing. How can you not call the #1 icon in the world? And she goes, well, do you know him? I said, no, I've never met the guy. All right. A week later, she calls me. She says, Joe, I call. He picks up. He goes, Liz, I'm a big fan. Watch you all the time. How can I help? He gives me the interview. At the end of the interview, she says to him, I said, you know, I interviewed Joe last week for the book, and you know, I wondered, do you know Joe? And he goes, no, I don't know Joe. He's done a great job out here at Ameritrade. I can tell you, everybody out here in Omaha loves him. He said, well, would you like to get to him? I said, yeah, I'd love to. So she wants to broker the trade between me and Buffett. I said, I'll take care of that. So I get my courage up, take a few deep breaths, and he picks up the phone, and I said, you know, I've lived in Omaha now for 4 years. I'm responsible for a company that's headquartered in Omaha. I live in Omaha. I bought a house in Omaha. I have a car registered in Omaha, in Nebraska. I have a Nebraska license plate. So I consider myself a fellow Omahan. But I really couldn't look Liz Clayman in the eyes if I didn't ask if you'd like to get together. He says, Joe, I'd love to. Let's do that. And we had quarterly dinners every quarter up until I really started football. And not so much the last 2 or 3 years because his health, he doesn't want to be out that much. There's also in Forbes, there's a write-up he called me one time. You want to hear the story or not? All right, so my dad told you, died of Alzheimer's. So I'm in New York. We had just done we had just acquired T.D. Waterhouse. That doesn't matter. I'm in the room with my dad in the hospital. My sister Peggy calls me and said something's got to be wrong. She's not going to bother me when I'm with my dad, but Dad was sort of out of it anyway. And he goes, "Is Warren?" So I say, "Warren." He goes, me, myself, and 2 other people are going to give a talk at the University of Nebraska in like 3 weeks. And I thought rather than they just fly out of there, I want to invite them back to the Omaha Country Club. And we talked about playing cards. Suppose you want to host a Texas Hold'em game. Something. "Oh yeah, Warren. Let me double check my schedule. I'll get back to you." Says, "Of course." So this is great. So bottom line, 3 weeks later, Warren walks in the room along with Bill Gates and along with Charlie Rose, and my son, and a handful of my golfing buddies played poker with those guys that got written up in Forbes. Sorry? Okay, he suggested $2,000 and go to charity. I said, bullshit. Okay, number one, I said, my guys can't necessarily afford $2,000, but they'll go $500, but we're not giving it to charity. These guys are going to win. They want to keep the money themselves. So $500, buy in, and you keep the money. He goes, okay, we'll go $500, buy in, we keep the money.
Next back
Yep.
here. My name's Clayton Allendike, Troy University, fellow Sun Belt in a way. We
Yep.
played Coastal Carolina, and hearing your coaching philosophy and everything really got me fired up because it hit close to home with John Summerall and what we kind of did the last couple of years at Troy. My first year we went 5-7. In the next 2 years we went 23-5, and the biggest thing was not the X's and O's, but the culture and the philosophy of football. And a couple of the things we'd always talked about is be a man, take responsibility for your actions. And then one of our pillars was love, and it was love is not an emotion, it's an action. And my biggest thing, I became very passionate about that, is what's the number one creator of culture and what's the number one killer of culture?
First of all, congratulations on the job you've done at Troy. You guys have really done a great job. I think culture is something that doesn't just happen. You don't come in and say, here's the culture. Culture is something that you have to earn. So when we began at Coastal Carolina, we began talking about there are going to be no rules. We have no rules. Guys, there's no football team in the country that doesn't have any rules. We're not. We're going to have BAM, and we explain what it was like. It takes a while to be able to live up to that. But it wasn't just football. It's how you do it in the classroom. It's everybody knows who our football players are, so your behavior on and off campus, and everybody's somebody's son or somebody's brother. So you have a responsibility to your family as well. So when you're not doing what you need to do, almost always it falls back to your responsibility. So all of a sudden, that becomes part of who you are. Either you start to live up to it or you don't. As that starts to progress, same thing in the business world, same thing I think in a family. As that starts to progress, the culture grows. And then it starts to feed itself, it starts to compound on itself. The way to kill the culture, stand on your own 2 feet, take responsibility for yourself, treat others with dignity and respect, live with the consequences of your actions. If there are no consequences, it doesn't matter if you're accountable. So when we were talking to recruits and I'm talking to the parents, they kind of love this idea. I said, but we tend to try to protect our children. So when they mess up, oh, it's on me, Mom. It's, yeah, okay, you're going to be, blah, blah, but there are no consequences. Not having consequences to the actions is what will kill the culture. But it always goes back to BAM.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yes? We good? Thank you, everybody. Whoa. Hey, didn't I tell you, make sure you're ready to go? Sheesh. Mark, get these, you're not paying that guy anything, are you?
Hi, John Mahoney, Notre Dame. But one of the things you had referenced earlier is that college football is like in kind of an inflection point right now. So with your experience in both business and coaching, what would be 2 or 3 things that you would do right now to try to save the game that obviously everybody in this room really cares about?
Talked about this a little bit last night with Brad and Mark. I'm a firm believer in this. First of all, I said 3 years ago, I said the college athletics should break away from the NCAA. Now, what should happen? There are 570,000 athletes that play college athletics. Of them, 6% get some money. 2.5% get more real money, $10,000, I'll tell you, or more than $10,000. That means there's 535,000 people not getting money. But all we're talking about is the money. The money drives everything. I don't care what the school tells you. The money is driving everything here, right? So you can't run a professional organization. I said if the NFL ran themselves the way we do in college today, they'd go out of business. You can't run a professional organization the way you do an amateur organization. The NCAA and college athletics has always been an amateur organization. So I think the first thing we got to do, I think the first thing I would strongly recommend we do, but we need leadership of college presidents. We need leadership from frankly, the senior coaches and the ADs. But you got to step up and do this. And the commissioners, the Power 4 football program to begin with, then probably men's basketball. Right now, just keep it simple. Power 4, Power 5 football breaks away. They become the PCAA, Professional Collegiate Athletic Association. They hire their own executives. They run themselves the way a professional franchise would do that. That's what they do. But then they run it in a way that's going to be successful. They're going to have contracts. They're going to have collective bargaining. They're going to have unions. They're going to have salary caps. They're going to have all those things. And there's going to be standard. You have a contract. There's no simple buyout when a coach leaves to go someplace else. No, you honor the contract. You do it that way. Everybody else, assuming they continue to stay as amateur, and it doesn't have to be every sport, of course, stay as amateur, then that could be the Amateur Collegiate Athletic Association. You know what? That doesn't have to change. That could stay to the NCAA and run it the way college athletics used to be run. That needs to take place. It's not ever going to work the way it is today. I hear one idea after another after idea of another. They're not going to work. Right? And by the way, most of us in the private sector, we talked about this last night too, how often in the private sector we have a problem at work in our jobs, we say, you know what, let's go to the federal government, see if they can help us out on this one. Ronald Reagan, I think it was 1986, said the worst 9 words in the English language is, hi, I'm from the government. I'm here to help. College athletics is going to the federal government to see, bail us out of this. So I think you got to break away, period. You got to break away. I'm very popular with the NCAA and Charlie Baker, those people, by the way.
Time for one more question.
Yeah, speak up. What's the process for hiring staff at Coastal, and how do you sustain the success? If leadership is important, then it's got to be about people. It's always about people. It's always about accountability. The most important decision we make as leaders is with regard to people. So if I'm hiring an offensive coordinator, I'm not doing it through a search firm. And I'm not doing it because he's somebody's buddy. I want to know what he has done with his offense. I want to look at some of his film. And the reason why I want to look at some of his film, I'm not critiquing his offense. I want to know what happens after they fumble. Do they come on the field and they go after it? Do I see a guy quit? All the years I was head coach, I bet anybody, see if you can find one play where I didn't have 11 guys giving 100%. I want to see if his guys giving 100%, et cetera. Then I want to talk to him, make sure he can communicate, make sure he's real. Then I want to talk to him about Bam. And I want to make it very clear before he gets hired, I'm not playing with Bam. I'm not fooling around with this. So if you come here and be a crappy coordinator, I got to fire you. But if you come here and you don't live up to Bam, I'm definitely going to fire you. And then I'm going to go to my contacts in the Bronx, and I'm going to have you whacked. And this is the continuation of that. Now, there was one more question over here, okay? You let Sam go on and on and on telling his stories.
Michael Herrick at Northern Arizona University. Just kind of piggyback on the prior question. I have a couple of friends in the coaching world in other sports. One is Boise State for the softball program and Idaho State for their women's volleyball program. We often have discussions kind of how the trajectory of the NCAA is kind of going in regards to the NIL deals and all that kind of stuff. And people don't understand a lot of the times of how these other programs are funded. And a lot of times they're funded by the big-time football programs. They're led to believe that those other women's sports and smaller men's sports are going to go away because they can't be funded anymore because the funding's going to go towards NIL. Do you know anything about that or have any comments on that?
It's a business. If anybody thinks college athletics is not a business now, you got to wake up. It's a business. So schools like Marshall, schools like Troy, schools like Coastal Carolina, we don't have unlimited budgets. We don't have the money or frankly the wealth and the alumni base that other schools do. So depending on what sports we got to prioritize, at the end of the day, our presidents still have to run the university. They still got to run a business. Their athletics is a business. So what do they have to do to be able to do that? Is there a possibility that means eliminate some sports? Yeah, there's a possibility that would happen. And I think none of that has happened yet because really, no one knows exactly what's going to ultimately this is going to look like. That's why take the professional piece, get rid of it, put it over there, handle it there, and handle amateur athletics the way amateur athletics have been handled for the last 100 years with regard to college. One thing too earlier when I mentioned the NIL, and what we're talking about the NIL now, and all the money associated with it. All these last 3 years, NIL. This is the Campbell Trophy Summit. Never one word, not one word about the academics. Not one word. Not one word. Put that in perspective. The real revenue sports have to break away, and they got to run themselves like businesses. And the rest of college will very, very well survive. But right now, it's going to be chaos. I think my time's up. That'd be great. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.